So gentleness is going to be a more disciplined, humble, take longer way to engage somebody in conflict.
I think you said something there, the take longer way.
Yeah.
Man, that's so hard.
Yeah.
I mean, when I'm in the midst of a conversation or an emotion or an argument, it's so hard to think, I'm going to choose the longer route.
Yeah.
When I just want to jump in.
I know.
When life throws a challenge at you, one thing is certain. To find a resolution for every issue, every problem, for everybody, there's more than one way. So in our last conversation, we talked a little bit about peace as one of the fruits of the Spirit, and thought we would continue that conversation today just around that kind of concept of fruit of the Spirit, and maybe take the next step in looking at an additional one of those that we've been talking about together.
So there's 7 of them. Hopefully we'll be able to talk about all of them at some point and in some way. But today I was hoping, we had talked about this before, to talk about something that probably isn't talked about that much, and that's one of the fruits of the Spirit that Paul calls gentleness. Gentleness. And when you hear that word gentleness, what does it make you think of?
I think
pre and post studying up on what we were going to talk about. Right?
Exactly. I was going to say my mind's a little bit of a mush, having done some research on it. But I think pre-studying it, I see simple images like a small animal, or something soft or sweet or kind or approachable.
Right.
Kind of those kinds of things would kind of be what would be in my mind just in the normal day-to-day use of that word. How about you?
Well, it's similar, and you talking about that just got me thinking of all of a sudden that Baby Yoda popped into my mind as you were sitting there talking about that. And I thought, well, in a way, he's a good example of how Paul, using the Greek word that is translated gentleness, meant this.
Okay, how so?
So Paul wasn't talking about what did you say? He was talking about kindness, but he wasn't necessarily talking about what oftentimes can be construed as like softness or timidity.
Yeah. Okay.
Or any of that. He was talking about strength, even power, but power disciplined through humility. And even more than discipline through humility, discipline through love. So power and strength, and that comes out in a gentle way, in a calmer way, in a way that is not trying to dominate the other person.
More measured.
Yeah, in a way that is not trying to coerce even the other person, but is trying to... if it's a conflict, it's not trying to just say, oh, this doesn't matter, and I'm not going to engage and be gentle.
Okay.
It's, I'm going to stand for what I believe to be right in this moment, but at the same time, I don't have to do that through dominating the other person, right? So you have enough strength that's tempered to be able to then, in a sense, kindly correct. And so and so the reason I was thinking about it with Grogu is, so here's this little guy and it doesn't seem like he can do anything, right?
Right.
Barely walk. He just this little guy. And then all of a sudden he's got all this power, right?
Right.
Yeah. And he's trying to learn how to use that power. Right? And use it in a way that's kind and helpful. And sometimes images like that can help us see a little bit of what he was talking about. I know that when we were talking about looking into things like films and movies of people who exhibited this understanding of gentleness. And who did you come across?
I think one of the ones that we mentioned, the movie The Green Mile.
Yeah.
With the idea of the John Coffey character, was just an enormous human, in that story, but had a great gentleness about him.
Yeah.
an inner spirit.
Yeah, so that movie, The Green Miles, John Coffey's this big, what years would you say that was? Like the 30s maybe?
30s maybe, yeah.
1930s in America, this big, huge African-American country guy wears too small, really, almost like Hulk-like, too small overalls. And he gets arrested by the local police for killing 2 young white girls.
Yeah.
And he didn't do it. Somebody else do it. But because of his imposing size and right and strength,
yes,
and the fear that it brought up in people, he became the perfect kind of scapegoat for a horrible thing that happened.
Yeah.
And while he's arrested, all the people who are his captors just start seeing exactly how strong and powerful this guy is, and yet at the same time it comes out not in a dominating way or a punishing way, or what are some other ways people use power? Aggressive way, or I've got more leverage on you now, so I'm going to use my leverage to put you in your place. He does just the opposite. He absorbs and transforms people's pain and suffering. And that would be almost the epitome of what Paul's trying to get at with gentleness. You've got all this strength, but you don't use it to dominate.
And I think it's, if we're looking at that passage without that understanding of Paul's definition, we've talked about how vocabulary and language are such a challenge, just to know what it's talking about. It'd be easy to view the fruit of the Spirit as something very different than what he's talking about.
Yeah. I know and I think this is why it's so important to really stick with Scripture. Don't stop reading it when you think you've figured it out. Stick with it, because it can, at least in my life, it has informed and re-informed me in ways every time I go back to it and look at it year after year after year. And, when I first was looking at this stuff, I was in my late teens and early 20s, and I didn't have a real grasp on what some of the nuances that we're talking about, especially, hey, this was written in Greek, and all translations have a hard time being translated. The words don't necessarily mean the same thing.
Right.
But I didn't come at it that way. So I came at it the way, this is what it means in English, so this is what it must mean. And so the way that I went about gentleness would have been more like, almost like repressing anger or pretending like something doesn't matter when it hurt me, or when somebody did something that I thought was damaging. But instead of interacting with them the way that actual gentleness would be, I would just pretend like it didn't, like it didn't matter, or I wasn't hurt, or you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
And so, I think that would be a way of misunderstanding my own faith.
And I think it'd be easy to take the definition that maybe we would have on our own and see that as permission to avoid conflict.
Yeah.
With the idea, I'm just going to step away from that.
Right.
I don't need to get in the middle of that. I don't want to do what that person maybe is doing. Instead of saying, no, I have a role in that. More fueled from the inside versus just my reaction to what's happening on the outside.
Yeah. Yeah. So my reaction to what's happening on the outside would be more like, my ego was hurt, and so I'm going to react out of that way.
Yeah.
And then usually that comes across in at its worst from a spiritual perspective, violence. And the thing about gentleness is its strength without resorting to violence. Right? Unfortunately, in our country, I think at times, especially through movies and things like that, we can see violence as redemptive. Like this, there's such a thing. And from a spiritual perspective, they're going to say violence, once we've gotten to violence, we've lost control of it all.
Yeah.
We're no longer participating in the life of, we're no longer participating in right alignment with the Spirit. You know what I mean? I mean, that's a weird sentence.
Yeah, help me unpack that.
Well, what I mean is, all these fruits of the Spirit, from Paul's perspective, don't come from my own strength.
Okay.
Right? They don't come from just the human strength. They come from being in right alignment, being in deep connection, being in right relationship with, hard to give it a definition, with what he's calling the Spirit, which would be the active presence of God.
Okay.
So when I fall into violence, then what he's saying is, and he says it really in a lot of ways in the verses right before the fruits of the Spirit in Galatians, when he says the works of the flesh are things like jealousy, envy, unbridled anger, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Right. So when we're working out of that place, then what he's saying, once again, it's not that you're bad. He's saying that you're out of alignment.
Misaligned. Yeah.
Misaligned. You're not in. So the fruits of the Spirit are a result of being in deep engagement with something greater than my own, and I'm just going to use the term ego. Something more than me. Right? And gentleness is going to be a part of what that is. And so violence is going to be one example of misalignment. And once again, if we're in a culture where that kind of celebrates it, and says, no, this is oftentimes is the way to redeem things, is to beat somebody up. I'm not saying that doesn't have to happen. What I'm saying is, from this perspective, then we're out of relationship. We're out of alignment with that, our better nature.
Yeah.
Right? So gentleness is going to be a more disciplined, humble, take longer way to engage somebody in conflict.
I think you said something there, the take longer way.
Yeah.
Man.
Yeah.
That's so hard.
Yeah.
I mean, when I'm in the midst of a conversation or an emotion or an argument, it's so hard to think, I'm going to choose the longer route.
Yeah.
When I just want to jump in.
I know. And that's why I think, once again, having examples of people that do that, that exhibit gentleness or exhibit the longer way. And one of the ones that popped up over and over again for me was Mr. Rogers.
Yeah.
Right? And could you imagine Mr. Rogers like going off and beating somebody up? No, I cannot imagine that.
Yeah.
But at the same time, he was a very, very strong guy.
Well, and he talked about a lot of really difficult issues.
Yeah.
With children and adults. I mean, he testified, before the government. I mean, there were so many different times where he appeared as a presence, but a very different presence, and definitely with strength.
Yeah.
But I'm sure there are people who would view him as weak.
Yeah. Right.
Or powerless.
And how come, right?
Yeah.
Because when it was time, I remember once seeing him go before a Senate committee to try to get money for the public broadcasting, so that not just his show but other shows on public broadcasting could happen. And he was interacting with one of the senators, and he kept talking about some of the things that we're talking about, engaging kids in the fullness of what it means to be human and how to live that way. And then he gave the example of helping a child deal with anger. So not say that it's bad or wrong. And he came up with a song. I can't remember the song, which is probably good because I wouldn't be able to sing it very well. But he came up with a song to essentially say, okay, so anger's here. You have anger. Anger's trying to point you to something's going on. Maybe a boundary has been crossed. Mm-hmm. Maybe you've seen somebody else be hurt. Maybe somebody's hurt your pet. Mm-hmm. Or on and on and on he would go. Okay, what do you do with that anger? And then he would help the child deal with one of the things being, can you take a pause and breathe for a while? Which would go right in line with every spiritual tradition there ever was, of what to do with energies that might overwhelm us. Yeah. Right? So right there in front of the Senate committee, he's singing this song about what to do, how to help kids deal with anger. Hmm. That is gentleness, and that is strength.
Yeah.
He doesn't say, put the child in his place. Child should be seen but not heard. Mm-hmm. Spank him. Yeah. Doesn't say any of that stuff. He also doesn't say, pretend like it's not going on.
Right.
Let him do what he wants. Let him just throw a tantrum. Doesn't say that either. Mm-hmm. And that, once again, would be an ideal example in our day and age of what Paul's trying to get at with this fruit of the Spirit called gentleness. Right? It comes out this way. And it comes out through a deep connection with that life force that we call spirit.
So we've been talking about alignment, and maybe that's another one of those words that's a little hard to describe or to know when you're in alignment, or how do you get to alignment?
Yeah.
What do you do with that?
Well, I think how do you get to alignment? And I think we've talked about this with spiritual practices that all religions kind of have to try to put you in a more self-aware, reflective place. Mm-hmm. In Paul's day and age, one of the things maybe we haven't talked about as much is you got to remember this fruits of the Spirit that he was writing about was written to a group of people. Mm-hmm. And this group of people was a small 20, 30 people who were a house, what we would call a house church, a house gathering community in the midst of a very pluralistic region, of all different types of religions and, ethnicities and different things like that. And this small group that Paul was writing to was a new thing, was a new community, was a new group. And so he was, had formed them and then left. And then oftentimes, as we see throughout some of the other New Testament letters, he would send them letters to sometimes encourage, to sometimes try to say, hey, you're way off base. Mm-hmm. Which for some people that might not seem very gentle. But it was gentle in the senses that he cared about them, so he wasn't going to just let them, in a sense, go off the rails.
Yeah, okay.
Right? And so he was going to be the one to say, no, I'm going to stay engaged with you, but I'm not going to let you do this without you hearing my piece. So part of the gathering would be reading a letter like this.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Or if they were going to study Scripture, their Scripture would be what we would call the Old Testament. Mm-hmm. The New Testament wasn't Scripture yet.
Right.
Okay. So they would look at the Old Testament, what we would call the Old Testament stuff, and somebody might give some kind of teaching around it, and there would be some kind of conversation, perhaps, maybe some kind of singing, and then they would have some kind of a meal. And in that communal study, and in that communal breaking of bread and fellowship, the hope was they would find some sense of alignment with what we're calling spirit.
Okay.
That they could help one another, that they could support one another, and that would be one additional thing into all the other things that we've talked about in terms of spiritual practices like meditation and breathing and walking and prayer, and it would be communal study, worship, and support, challenge and support. All of those things together. And that somehow or another that would open them up to this larger presence.
Yeah.
That Paul calls spirit, that we call spirit at times. And that would be a way to be in alignment. Right? And the hope would be somehow or another through that support and through those kind of experiences, people would have a felt sense of God's presence in their lives and be able to live from that place. Right? So with the gentleness piece, how you might know you have it would be, so you're doing the things that help you have a sense of connection, whatever that happens to be for you. We're throwing in this new thing of study scripture, find community, find places where people will support and challenge you. Okay, throw that in there. So you're doing all that, and there's some kind of conflict. Let's say you're parent-child even.
Okay.
Right? So your child is just acting up, and in a sense doing some of what would happen in these communities when Paul would write a letter. So your child's going off the rails, and he's going in a direction. The non-gent, and you're the one with the power, right? You're the one with the strength and power as the parent, right? One hyper-reactive way to deal with that would be just pure anger and, once again, some level of violence.
Yeah.
And that's a quick way.
Yeah.
Right? From the perspective of what we're talking about, Paul was saying, well, that would be more like the works of the flesh. That would be more like being a little bit out of alignment, maybe a lot out of alignment with what he's calling spirit. Okay? The other side would be, well, isn't he cute? Or isn't she? Well, I'm just not going to, I don't want to crush that child's spirit.
They'll figure it out.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm not going to, so I'm just going to let them be. This is just who they are. That would be the other. And that would be repression, abdicating, not... Yeah. He would say you would know that you're in alignment and have that gentleness piece is what you would not dominate, but you would engage. And you would engage more along the lines of the way Mr. Rogers was trying to talk about. How can I sit here and deal with and help my child through whatever it is that they're going through, however long that takes?
Yeah.
Without resorting to
a short-term solution or a quick
flying
reaction.
Off the handle. Yeah. I'm stronger than you, so I'm just going to dominate you.
Yeah.
Right? And I know, once again, when that happens sometimes, I'm not saying people are necessarily horrible human beings. But I am saying, okay, if that becomes your default position over and over and over again, then what Paul is going to say is, well, why don't you pray a little more, or find a group and talk about this.
Yeah.
On and on and on, right? Because this gentleness piece, this fruit of the Spirit that he's calling gentleness, would be an ideal way to engage. Stay engaged in the conflict. Stay in it, using your strength in order to help support the person get through it. That would be it.
It makes me think of another visual example of coaching.
Yeah.
Especially like right now being March Madness, with the idea that if I'm on the sidelines and I see my players doing something not in the plan, I can quickly get their attention in a very demonstrative way, to correct that. And there are plenty of examples of people blowing up on the sideline or all different ways that people do that. But I think about stories of people talking about Tony Dungy and how when things got intense that he would soften his voice softer and softer and softer so that people had to lean in to listen to what he had to say. And they knew there was an intensity about when he got softer versus him going the other direction and being, waving his arms or throwing a chair on the court or
Yeah.
whatever, different examples there might be. But it's just, there's so many different ways to do it.
There is. And the danger is to fall into the good-bad dualism.
Right.
Like, so if you fly off the handle, that makes you a bad person. No.
Right.
What Paul's going to say is, check it, watch it. Okay, pay attention to that, because that's basically from his perspective saying you're living out of your own sense of ego. You're living out of your own sense of embarrassment, hurt, whatever else it is that is causing you to do this. The anger that you're feeling might be justified. It's how to use it.
Yeah.
And not let it just dominate you. And I think that the result of a disciplined way to use your strength, from his perspective, might be something like what you're talking about with Tony Dungy. Mm-hmm. Or the parent who can sit in, their child's throwing a tantrum in the middle of a grocery, not that ever happened to me, but in the middle of a grocery store.
Yeah.
And the parent that can sit on the floor there for a while and say, okay, well, let's work through this. And not get embarrassed, not worry.
Yeah.
I get that we're going to worry.
Yeah.
But not let that dominate so much that
you
end up doing something that you feel bad about.
Yeah.
So none of it's bad, good. It's more of in and out of connection, in and out of alignment.
Yeah.
Right? That's why I think they use the term fruit of the Spirit, because it's a manifestation.
Yeah.
The fruit's like a manifestation of something, and it's not. It doesn't have to be like so hard, so forced.
Yeah.
By God, I'm going to have my way,
mm-hmm.
no matter what I have to do.
Because that sure feels good.
Yeah, it does. And like I said, a lot of times, especially in certain situations, it's quicker.
Yeah.
A lot of these things, when it comes to how do I find what is it that I do to help myself with being in alignment? Or what I would say is being more aware that the Spirit is present. Let's put it that way. It takes time.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just a matter of how much time do you have? We live very busy lives, and a lot of this stuff is a real challenge to a busy life.
Yeah.
So please don't hear me putting anybody down, right? Because we all fall we all get out of alignment. Let's just put it that way. We just do.
Yeah.
Life does that to us.
Yeah.
But when that happens, rather than feel bad and stay in just that feeling bad place, it's be aware.
Yeah.
And that's where I think maybe being in a group, especially for extroverted
what
people.
helps you be aware? What helps you return?
Yeah.
What are the things that can?
I think
support you.
I hear people who have so-called accountability groups.
Mm-hmm.
So that you can go somewhere and share, hey, this is what's been going on with me. And they're not going to judge you, but they're going to help you.
Yeah.
And they're not going to say, hey, that's okay.
Yeah.
Just keep doing that. Keep going off the rails. Right? So I think that, we started this whole thing with, I think, that's why when you do study Scripture, it's so important to really know what it is that the Scripture is saying.
Yeah.
And how hard it is sometimes how these words get translated, and then when they get translated, take on whole new meanings.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's very difficult, and I think it doesn't serve us well. But what does is when we can look at it and see that there are people who have gone before us though the context of their life might be very different, the human condition was the same.
Yeah.
So they were going through the same things we were going through.
There's wisdom to learn from.
Yeah. Thank you for listening to this episode of the More Than One Way podcast, brought to you by the Center for Spiritual Practice in Knoxville, Tennessee. We really appreciate your time and would love to hear your feedback. You can reach us by emailing hello@morethanonewaypod.com, or you can connect with us on social media using the handle @morethanonewaypod. If you found this episode helpful, we hope that you'll share it with your friends, with your family, with people you work with all the people who you know. Thank you and take care.